Well, here we are, liturgical calendar, working our way through. You are here, arrow, showing us where we're at. We've been, half the calendar is the story of Christ, half the calendar is the story of us, and we go through this cyclically every year. And we're coming close to the middle of Easter, which ends with Pentecost Sunday. And that's what we're aiming towards, that's where we're at. I did a service this past that was Friday. Yeah, Friday and Saturday. I did one on Friday, and I do about 30 funerals a year. So I was kind of there, and I'm like, boy, these people look familiar. I'm looking around, it's like, yeah, these people look very familiar. And it was Jerry Howard, that was his service. And I saw someone that I knew there, and I'm like, I know him. It must be he just knew the person, but these other people look very familiar. And I did the whole service, and then we kind of go out to the graveside, and they kept referring to his wife as Ginger the whole service. Ginger, Ginger, Ginger. It's like, doesn't ring a bell. But I went and I looked at the headstone of where his wife was buried, because she passed away a couple years ago, and I recognized the name. I did that service in 2022. And then it just kind of dawned on me, it's like, that's why I know all these people. I've already done the service for the matriarch of the family, and now the patriarch. And that's when it was after, right before the graveside service. And then I'm like, now I know all these people. And then they started coming up to me and saying, we really enjoyed the service you did for our grandma, back in the day. So thank you for being able to do this one too. But have you ever been in a situation where you're just looking at someone, and you're like, I know them from somewhere, right? I don't know where, but I know them from somewhere, and you can't quite put your finger on it, and it just irritates you. And then when the opportunity's passed and you're at home and you're like, oh, now I remember who they were. Like sometimes that happens. Less now for me that my beard is white, but that's a different story. When the disciples, they keep encountering Jesus and not recognizing him in the Easter passages. If we kind of look at how we celebrate Easter, because Easter is an 8-week season. It's not a one-day, shot in the dark kind of a yay day, but it's 8 weeks long on the liturgical calendar. We're on the 3rd week of Easter right now, and it ends with Pentecost. But if we look at how the church normally celebrates Easter, it's the biggest celebration of the year. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I love Easter Sunday. It's one of my favorites. You get to see all the people that you haven't seen in a while, and everyone's all in one place at one time. And there's just a sense of like, wow, there's a lot of energy in the room, a celebration. Christ is risen, he's risen indeed. There's all this stuff. It's good stuff. No complaints about it at all. But if you look at the narrative passages in the Gospels, that's not their Easter that they experienced. And we have about 2,000 years of interpreting what that meant that makes us celebrate. But we also we can look back on this passage and say, you know what? They're confused. They don't know what's going on at all. Have you ever noticed the disciples don't know what's going on? Like, they never know what's going on. And we can kind of be like, oh yeah, doubting Thomas. He was kind of a loser because he was doubting that Jesus rose from the dead. But, he gets a bad rap because all the other disciples are too. They have no idea what's going on. They're doubting. They don't. So I did a little compilation for you, because I'm a nerd, and I got a nerd, because that's the way I am. But I went through the 4 Gospels resurrection accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I wrote down all the emotions that they experienced. So here we go. You're ready to experience all the emotions the disciples did on Easter. Not a lot of yay stuff, just in advance. Okay, disciples' response to resurrection. In Matthew, we have just a brief 15 verses. That's it. Of the resurrection. There's only 15 verses of the resurrection account. So not a lot has been given to that. And there's a little bit of joy mixed with a lot of fear and doubt. That's what the disciples experienced on Jesus' resurrection. A little bit of joy, a lot of fear, a lot of doubt. Okay, so there's one. Now, Mark, the next one. This is the most troubling one because it's weird. There's a brief narrative of 8 verses. Now, if you notice in your Bible, when you get past those 8 verses, it says Here's an ending that was added later. And then below that is here's a second ending that was added even later. And suddenly we can handle snakes without getting poisoned by their venom or something. That was added later on, all that stuff. So that Appalachian Pentecostal snake handling stuff, I guess that was invented around like 100 or so when a monk was writing out the Gospel of Mark. He's like copying it. They don't have Xerox machines, you know, so they're doing it by hand. And they come to the end and he's like, well, that's anticlimactic. And he's like, I gotta fix that. And he writes a little ending. We don't know who did it, but it says right there, the earliest manuscripts don't have either of the two endings. They call them alternative endings. The original ending is 8 verses long, and it ends with everyone being shocked, trembling, confused, hiding in fear, and saying nothing. The end. That's weird. That's a very weird ending. You can see why the monk who was copying it was like, we can't do that. Like, we're not going to put that out there. No. So that's Mark. That's Mark. I think Matthew's a little bit better because it has the joy in there, but it's a lot of fear and doubt. Mark, this is weird. Okay, so now we got Luke. Luke is the guy that's the historian. He's trying to like give accurate, like here's how it went down kind of stuff. He told us that's what he's trying to do. There is a lengthy chapter with multiple appearances. So this is when it starts to change on us a little bit, and Jesus starts to appear a couple of times. We have the road to Emmaus story that's in here. That's after he resurrects. Here's the emotions: puzzled, terrified, clueless, frightened, doubtful, and disbelieving. Well, that's happy. All right. That's where Luke ends. Now, we know that Luke continues his story in the book of Acts. That's the sequel. But that's literally where the book of Luke ends. Okay, John. We have multiple chapters, multiple appearances. They are commissioned. They are given a Pentecost filling of the Spirit. They're doubting, they give up, and they go home to go fishing. Okay. That's the Easter story as it is captured, and those are the emotions of the disciples as they are communicated in the Gospels. Very different from how we feel about Easter today, isn't it? And I'd like to explore that a little bit, because we have 2,000 years of celebration that we can add to it, interpretation of what this means and what it kind of implements and all this. They didn't have any of that, and they're just kind of terrified, confused, and frightened. So why are they experiencing these things? Now, this passage here, Jesus has already appeared to them a couple of times. We had the doubting Thomas. We had the breathe on you and receive the Spirit moment. Go out and forgive sins with all those people. Like, that just happened before that. He appeared to the women disciples before that. But we have to know, in the biblical narratives, Easter evokes a response of doubt and disillusionment. That's odd. In the gospel narratives themselves, Easter evokes doubt and disillusionment in the disciples. Why? That's what I want to know. Why are they so freaking out about the resurrection of Christ? And they're like, they've got filled with the Spirit at this Pentecost moment, and they've had Jesus appear to them. Hey, I'm not dead. And they're like, let's go back home. I think I'm going to go fishing. Like, we're going to take up our old careers that we used to have. So it's only after we unyoke God from our personal religious project that we can see the resurrection for what it is. This is what I think the gospel writers are trying to communicate. Because the disciples had a clear vision and expectation of what God was supposed to do when the Messiah came to town. He was going to claim the throne, which he did on Palm Sunday, riding on the donkey, and we shouting hosannas. Cleanse the temple, which he did when he walked in and got the whip out and drove the money changers and flipped the tables. And then rally a military rebellion against Rome. Those were the three things they expected the Messiah to do. Did Jesus do the third one? He didn't. He didn't do that. So they are disillusioned. They had a whole personal religious project. There was different interpretations on how to do it, but they all wanted the same thing. Let's get Rome out of our land so we can be independent again and kind of govern ourselves the way we want to. That's what they want. It's not what they got, and everyone walks away totally disillusioned because they had an expectation placed upon God that God was going to use the powers of the sword and the world and the armies and partner up with God and then give these people what they wanted so that they would be dominant over everyone else. That didn't happen at all. Even in Luke, the gospel, at the beginning of Acts, the disciples are like, I think we're starting to understand this. Okay, is this the time when you're going to like redeem the people of Israel, which is code word for slaughter the Romans? And Jesus is like, no, you still don't quite get it. That's not going to happen. You're going to go to Jerusalem, you're going to get the Spirit filled in you, and then you're going to take a message out and show people how to live like I showed you how to live. That's what I want you to do, all the peoples. And so the radical message of the book of Acts is every tribe, every nation, every tongue can receive the Spirit of God. And that was absolutely revolutionary to them. They had an expectation in their heads, this thing is for me, and it's going to benefit me, and it's going to put those people out there, like we're going to run them down, and we're going to be the dominant ones. That was their expectation. When God did not meet that expectation, they walked away disillusioned, doubting, fearful. What do we even do? That, like, the disciples were locked in a room, and then Jesus appears to them and says, peace be with you. In that one scenario. And then Thomas, he was like doubting, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to see it unless I can stick my finger in the holes in his hands, kind of a moment. And Jesus appears to him a week later. And so now this passage comes along. Those two moments have already happened. And Peter and the rest of the disciples, they just kind of say, well, now what? Well, I guess we can go home and just do what we used to do. We used to be fishers. Like, that was our trade. Let's go do that. I don't know what else to do with this thing. Jesus has already filled them with the Spirit, received the Holy Spirit, breathed on them, Pentecost moment in the book of John. And then he's already given them the Great Commission. Matthew has a Great Commission. John has a Great Commission. He's like, go and like forgive people's sins in my name. Go out there and do it. And they're like, how about we just go home and go fishing? Because I don't like that. That was their interpretation. That's what they did. We're not going to do what Jesus said, even though he's given us the Spirit to do it and the commission to do it. And they still have no idea. Like, how are we supposed to extend forgiveness to the Romans? How are we supposed to extend forgiveness to the Samaritans that we hate so much? How are we supposed to extend this forgiveness, the life of God, and invite people to the table when we don't like them? And so they said, instead of doing that, let's just go home. Because I don't really feel like doing that. And they went home and they went fishing, and Jesus visited them with that. So the victory of God's love over the human powers is what they didn't see. Like, humans accomplish stuff through like violence, domination, manipulation, all of those ways that we get other people to do what we want. That's how humans kind of see, this is how we get stuff done. And then Jesus shows up, he says, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to use the powers of the world to do the projects of God. That's not how it works. If you want to do the projects of God, you have to do it according to God's ways. I'm going to live out those ways for you to see. And he like preached the Sermon on the Mount. Here's love your neighbor, love your enemies, love God as you love yourself, and like do good to those who curse you, and all this stuff. Like, this is how we do it, guys. And they were like, okay, that's weird, because we thought you were gonna like rally us together and have us go slaughter the Romans. And now you're telling us that we got to extend love to them. How do we do this? We don't know. So let's dive into this passage a little bit. Longest intro ever. They're gone fishing. They went out and they went fishing. They went to Galilee. We got a reminder. Jesus has already visited them twice. And Pentecost has already happened. Like Acts has a Pentecost moment. This is how John records it. He's doing something different. And they're already commissioned to do the work. They've already had all that stuff. They're ready to go. And they're like, nah, let's just go home. Let's go fishing. We give up. We're done. And so Jesus is on the shore with this charcoal fire, and he's inviting the disciples for breakfast. So he showed himself in this way, and the disciples did not know it was him. Because when you can't recognize God, when you have a clear picture in your head of what that God is going to do for you and how it's going to work for you and who that God is against. As one of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, said, if it turns out that God hates all the same people that you do, it's very clear evidence that you have made God in your image. It's like, dang, that one hurts. That one hits right to the heart. That's what the disciples there are struggling with. They don't recognize Jesus because they want Jesus to be a certain thing and a certain way for them and not for other people. It's difficult to recognize Jesus outside of our expectations. And this is the thing, like, we all grow up with a shaped image of what God is and what that God will do and what that God is like. And some of it comes from church, some of it comes from theology, some of it comes from culture, some of it comes from just the world around us. And then it shapes God into this expectation in our mind. And then, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there's like a clear expectation in your mind. If I'm a good person and I do everything right, then I shouldn't experience all these bad things that happen in my life. And then the bad things happen in your life and you're like, what the heck? I thought I was doing this all right. Like, what's the matter? I thought I was doing great. That is something that it breaks the expectation of God that we built in our minds. When we experience something, because sometimes we build that, like in our minds, we build that expectation of what God is supposed to be like as insulation from how we know the world actually is. And then the harsh thing happens in our life, and then we can't be in denial of how harsh the world can be anymore. And how sometimes even random stuff can appear. And we then like run to like different cliche sayings that try to rebuild the image of God, who it used to be in our minds. Until we can't do that anymore. And then we run into a brick wall and then we say, well, I don't even know what I believe anymore. I don't know if you've ever been in those situations, but I have. It's a little bit harder when you're a pastor. But I have been in those situations and I've had to rebuild like my image of what I believe God is, which is why I dove into the scriptures and the culture and the history. And I tried to learn, like, what is Jesus actually telling us to do? Not like the Christianity I grew up was more like Paulianity. Like we just read Paul a lot. And then we only quoted Jesus on the lust and the judgment stuff. And that was it. Like I never studied the Sermon on the Mount or any of the other stuff. It was like, let's go to Romans, let's go to Paul. He gives us all these lists. It's so easy when you have the list, isn't it? It's like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Like, okay, I won't do those things. Now I'm a good Christian. And then tragedy happens and you're like, what the heck? Thought I was doing it all right. But we got to dive into what Jesus is actually saying here. So they didn't recognize him at all. And then it says, just after daybreak, Jesus appears. So they unproductively sat in the dark for a long time, fishing. Because when you're a fisher, commercial fisherman, you go out at night at these times. And you cast the net and you bring in fish. They can't see the nets at nighttime. And so daybreak happens and Jesus is like, hey, catch any fish? Which you never want to say that to a fisherman. Like, it's just, I go to the Lake Michigan and we walk the pier and I'm tempted. All the people like fishing on the pier, I'm just tempted. Hey, catch any fish? But every time I do that, I can look at their eyes roll back like, oh, it's one of those people. No. It's like, that's how the disciples are feeling in this moment. So he's like, children, you have no fish, have you? It's like, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. No. So this is like chapter 20. They had this commission to go and take this message of forgiveness out to all the peoples. And they instead said, let's go home and go fishing because we don't want to do that. And so then he's like, have you tried casting on the other side of the boat? Oh my gosh, don't ever say that to a fisherman either. Like, I saw a fish over there. I did that once on the pier. Like, I was walking on the pier and I'm like, ooh, there's a big fish. And then there's a fish here down there. I'm like, hey, I just saw a big fish over there. Maybe you can try over there. Eyes roll back in their head like, gosh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I really did see the fish. Sorry, I'm just justifying myself in front of you. But I just kind of resist the temptation to talk to fishermen on the pier now because I never say the right thing. I'm expecting the disciples are kind of experiencing the same emotions. Like, who's this guy? It's like, hey, did you try the other side of the boat? It's like, no. Why would we do that? It's like, I'm sure they probably did, you know? It's like, well, cast it on the right side. Now, you got to remember, John is not just doing like Time Magazine, like here's how it went down kind of stuff. John is trying to communicate a narrative of what's happening, but also there's an undercurrent in a lot of symbolism of what he's saying that we're supposed to pick up on. There's a spiritual symbolism to almost every detail he ever communicates in John. There is a spiritual symbolism because John is just freaky like that. He doesn't do, like Luke is just like, well, I'm just going to give you great Theophilus. This is how it went down. I'll tell you the story. And John, he starts off with a poem and he's like, I think I'll write 2nd Genesis. In the beginning was the word. And it's just like, it's a totally different beast at this point. So he's like, cast on the other side. It's like, oh, we tried that. You cannot do the new thing in an old way. That's what John is trying to get us. Like, they've been fishing all night, didn't get anything. It's like, okay, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, I think Einstein said that was the definition of insanity. I don't know if that's actually true. I just heard it said a lot. So they throw it on the other side and they catch this haul of fish, right? This big, huge haul, they bring it in the boat. And when you are being invited into a new season, it feels like a death. This is the hard part of Easter. This is what causes disillusionment. When you're being invited into something new, it feels like a death. And in fear, we wish to return to what we knew and where we felt safe. This is what Easter is, the big challenge. Easter challenges us to step into something new. We're always growing. There's always possibility. There's always new things. But in order to step into those new things, you have to let go of old things and old ways that you used to, how we used to do them. But the problem with that is I know this. I know how to do this, and I know this feels safe. Like, these blue things are a little bit unsafe for me. I don't know what y'all are going to ask me. I'm just like, write down your questions on here. Normally, I just stick with the gospel, and I stick with the liturgical calendar, and I know how to do it, and we have these prayers, and it's like, it feels comfortable to do it. And then I'm like, let's try something new, because I get bored sometimes. And I'm like, let's try something new. And I'm like, oh gosh, but do we really want to try something new? But we do, and then it's fun. And it's like, okay. But when you're being invited into something new, a new job, a new season, new wave of health, new whatever vision for your life, you have to let go of the old stuff, the old ways, or else you won't be able to reach for the new. Like, the new is always out of reach as you hold to the old. And you have to let go of old and then go through an in-between time of like, this is scary, and then grab for something new on the other side. That's why the disciples are always in fear. They're like, no, God is this way, and he's going to like help us defeat Rome so we can do this and this and this and this. And then it didn't happen. And they have this huge in-between time of they're like absolutely shocked and like they don't know what to do. I got to skip part 2 because it's really just nerdy stuff. That's fun, but it's nerdy stuff. So you can talk to me about 153 fish later if you want to. But part 3, this is the I love you man section. I love this part. I love you man. Remember those beer commercials? Love you man. I will never forget those. Commercials shape my brain. All right. So Jesus says to Simon Peter, he invites him to a charcoal fire. What's important is a charcoal fire is where Peter denied Jesus. So he's inviting him back to the place where he made the biggest mistake of his life. There's some symbolism there. It's a charcoal fire. And Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Which is the sacrificial love, agape. More than these. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that we're friends. You don't want to hear that if you're asking someone out on a date, do you? like, I love you. It's like, yeah, we're good friends. It's like, oh man, friend zone. Okay, so this is kind of what's going on in this passage. Because Jesus is saying, do you sacrificially love me to give your life for me and what I'm calling you into? And he's like, you know, we're good friends. Like, kind of, but we're good buddies. There's 2 different words for love, phileo and agape. And he says to feed his lambs. And he's like, a second time, Simon, son of John, do you agape love me? Do you self-sacrificially give yourself to me and my cause and what I'm calling you to do? And he's like, Lord, you know that we're friends. You know that we're friends. Come on. And Jesus said to him, okay, well, you're going to have to tend my sheep then. And then he said for the 3rd time, Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? Do you consider me a friend? And Peter felt hurt because he said to him a 3rd time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything and you know that we're friends. He never steps up and says, I will give my life for you. He never steps up into that agape form of love in this passage. He doesn't. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. The crazy part, the part that comes right after this, Peter starts complaining to Jesus. He's like, you're asking me to die. And then John walks by and he's like, what about that guy? Like, John's not going to die. The writer of the gospel is like walking by, and he's the only one of the disciples that wasn't martyred. And so I think he's kind of like writing like an apology for himself. Like, this is why I didn't have to die. Well, anyways, Peter's like, that's not fair. Like, you're asking me to agape you, and then this guy walking by here, he's not going to have to give his life for you. Like, he's just going to die an old death and live out his life. That's not fair. And Jesus looked at him and said, well, follow me. Like, that was his response. You follow me. And it's very easy to look at someone else's life and think that they have a life that's better than yours, easier than yours. Why is God being so hard on me? Why do I have to go through this? Why is God asking this of me? Kind of a thing. That's a thing that's constructed in our brain, that God divvies out like hard things for everyone to experience, but that's not how it is. Life divvies out hard things for you to experience, and it is our job to live as Christians in the world in the midst of the hard things that come our way. God does not divvy out hard things. God did not, take your loved one from you. God did not give your loved one cancer. God does not divvy things out like that. We're not a Calvinist church here. Like Calvinists believe that. We don't believe that. Life hands those things out. I don't know how that works, but life hands those things out. And Jesus looks at each one of us, and it is our job to follow him. And when he says follow him to Peter, Jesus is asking him twice if he would be willing to die. And he's asking him, do you trust what I've done? Like, you're seeing me. I am not dead anymore. I lived this manner. I walked all the way through death on the other side, and I live. Do you trust that? Do you trust that this way that I have lived is better than the way that you had planned for yourself? This self-sacrificial love for the world and all people. Basically, he's saying, do you trust me? Like, do you trust me and the way that I've told you? Will you live out the way that says that love is greater than power? Do you trust that? That's what faith is. Faith says, I know that power gets stuff done and gets stuff done fast, but do I trust that love is the better way? When it looks and appears as though whoever is dominating things gets the world the way that they want it. And Jesus is saying love is the better way. Always love is the better way. Follow me, and then help others follow me. So a couple of reflection questions for you to think about. Where in your life or community do you encounter charcoal fires, places of past failure, shame, or brokenness? And how might God be inviting you to rekindle these spaces with grace and reconciliation? Part 2, when have you relied on your own efforts, like the disciples fishing all night, instead of trusting grace? What right side of the boat is Jesus calling you to cast your net toward today? Third one, what sheep am I called to care for? And here's a spiritual practice for you to try this week. Sit before a lit candle. Identify the season God is inviting you towards. Identify what needs to be released. And imagine God speaking the words, follow me. Then extinguish your candle. Now, our benediction today is not a Geit poem from the Psalms, but my homeboy Thomas Merton wrote a prayer that I think is just absolutely beautiful for this moment. Thomas Merton, Trappist monk from the 40s to the 60s. And he wrote this prayer, my Lord, my God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. That is the Merton Prayer by Thomas Merton. Amen.